This email is documenting the prediction that on October 29th, 2025, one or two of the Toronto Blue Jays baseball players will collide with each other or the outfield wall, and as a result will injure their head. We can see the date that this email is posted or sent, and the prediction for October 29th, 19 days later after this date. Also, the date that this video is posted on the social media platform you are watching it on proves this prediction is being made ahead of time. Post dates for videos cannot be changed after they are posted. This October 29th, 2025 predicted head injury will be 3 months and 3 days after the shooter killed himself on the 33rd floor of the tower in Manhattan, where the headquarters of the NFL is located. The shooter was angry over the head injuries he suffered playing football. The attached diagram explains more reasons for how this prediction is known ahead of time. The collision and head injury of a Toronto Blue Jay on October 29, 2025, the predicted anyway, will be 2 days before it is predicted that Paul Simon, the singer-songwriter, will fall and injure his head on October 31st, 2025. All right, welcome. This video is predicting that famous singer-songwriter Paul Simon of Simon and Garfunkel will slip and fall and hit his head and injure his head on October 31st, 2025. It's possible he will die the same day, but it's also possible that he won't and die later at some point due to the injury of his head. But this is the date it is predicted that he will fall and hit his head. In fact, it kind of makes a little more sense that he won't die right away, because then it will just be like he died from falling. But the prophetic significance of all of this is that he will hit his head. So if he were just to hit his head and die immediately, probably wouldn't be so much in the news about how he died because he injured his head. It would just be that he died. So it's probably safer to assume that he won't die on this day, but will fall on his head on this day. Okay? Okay. Now, this is an astounding thing here, this diagram. It's really profound, and it incorporates a lot of history. Paul Simon is known for being an avid baseball fan, specifically, though, a Yankees baseball fan. He's from New York City. All right, and this day here, April 25th, 1999, was the day that Paul Simon sang at the opening day, on the opening day, well, no, it wasn't opening day, but he sang in Yankee Stadium, in the outfield, the song Mrs. Robinson. The reason is because in the song Mrs. Robinson, he inserted a lyric, where have you gone, Joe DiMaggio? So let me just get the entire lyric. The lyric is, where have you gone, Mrs. Robinson? Our nation turns its lonely eyes to you. Ooh. So that's the lyric from the song Mrs. Robinson, and it's a central and iconic part of the song. Everyone knows that lyric, right? Or those that know the song Mrs. Robinson. It's an old song, of course, so it'll be an older generation that will know this song, but everyone that's old enough to know this song knows that this is like the key, or rather the central iconic part of the song. Where have you gone, Joe DiMaggio? And it's out of place. It doesn't make sense really in the context of the rest of the song. But being a baseball fan, Paul Simon just decided to insert this one line about Joe DiMaggio, the famous New York Yankees baseball player. But God's using this as a prophetic sign, because the follow-up to where have you gone, Joe DiMaggio, is our nation turns its lonely eyes to you. This is a sign of judgment. This is a sign of a nation turning away from God. This is a sign, this is a statement about how things aren't good in America. That's why Paul Simon says, our nation turns its lonely eyes to you. The song would have been created or written in the 60s, in the middle of the Cultural Revolution, of the baby boomer generation and the Vietnam War. And there was a lot of strife in America, high crime in the inner cities. So our nation turns its lonely eyes to you. This is a sentiment about America going in the wrong direction, which is why God is using this as a prophetic sign in general. So back to this, the reason why Paul Simon sang this song in the outfield of Yankee Stadium on this date is that Joe DiMaggio had just died. If I recall, he died just like shortly before the beginning of the season. Or maybe it was even after the beginning of the season. I don't know. But this is the day that Paul Simon went to the Yankee Stadium to sing about Joe DiMaggio. It was right after he died. April 25th, 1999. Now, the interesting thing about this is that it occurred on the 25th of the month, which makes which immediately comes to mind how it's a exact month connection to the release of Paul Simon's best-selling solo album, Graceland, which is the prophetic album God is pointing to in general through Paul Simon. Okay, Graceland, of course, is named after the mansion estate of the king of rock and roll, Elvis Presley, in Memphis, Tennessee. Well, Memphis is named after Memphis, Egypt. And the mansion is symbolic of a palace, a king's palace in Egypt. The Israelites escaped the king in the palace and his persecution into the desert and then crossed into the promised land. In the Bible, the king of Egypt is symbolic of the Antichrist. Memphis, Tennessee is in the area of the country that is nicknamed Little Egypt. Elvis Presley had a famous hit, or has a famous hit, named Little Egypt. And also Elvis Presley covered, and famously covered, one of Paul Simon's songs, Bridge Over Troubled Water. Okay, so there's, in other words, a lot of connection between Paul, because Paul Simon in the song Graceland, not just the name of the album, he has a song Graceland. He's singing about traveling to Graceland with his young son. Okay, and so the song is, in the chorus of the song is, I'm going to Graceland in Little Egypt. That's not part of the song, Little Egypt, but you get the idea. There's a big connection. Now, Elvis Presley died in his Graceland mansion due to a head injury. A lot of people don't know that. People know that he was taking a lot of drugs. But the reason why he was taking all of these drugs, it's now known. It's now believed to be the case from a number of experts on this sort of thing, that he died because of his autoimmune diseases that were a result of the head injury that he suffered 10 years prior to his death. So his health deteriorated, and he was using these drugs to compensate for it. But his health deteriorated not because of the drugs themselves, but because of the autoimmune diseases that he was suffering from, which were the result of the massive head injury he suffered when he fell and hit his head on the porcelain bathtub in his home in Los Angeles. And Los Angeles is symbolic in general in God's signs of fallen angels. Okay, and Graceland in Tennessee is the 4 times 4th state. The 44th president is the Antichrist, speaking of fallen angels. The number that symbolizes the Antichrist in Bible prophecy, and again, the king of Egypt is symbolic of it, and he's the king of rock, and he lived in a palace in Memphis, which is, as I just explained, symbolic of the king in Egypt, who is symbolic in the Bible of the Antichrist. The Antichrist the 44th president, the number of the Antichrist in Bible prophecy is 666, which is why the release of the Graceland album about the Graceland estate and the 4 times fourth state in Little Egypt is 660 weeks and 6 days before Paul Simon sang Mrs. Robinson at Yankee Stadium after Joe DiMaggio died. Now, as I'll explain, Joe DiMaggio famously suffered a head injury, suffered 2 of them, but I'll explain that in a second. Mrs. Robinson, because the 44th president Antichrist will become the president again through a fall, when it is predicted that Kamala Harris and Gavin Newsom, who will be at the time of the fall be the Democratic Party presidential candidate nomination, and they will fall in this plane crash that will be due to a bird strike, a hit, as in hitting on the head and falling. And then as a result, Mrs. Robinson, Michelle Robinson Obama, will be nominated in an emergency to take the Democratic Party into the election, and she will make Barack Obama her vice president candidate. And this will be legal because the Supreme Court will rule that the 22nd Amendment doesn't prevent this. And this will already be established by this time because President Trump is going to do this first. J.D. Vance in the next election is going to run as the president, and Trump will run as the vice president. So Trump is laying down the groundwork in many multiple different ways for the Antichrist without realizing it. It's all part of Satan's plan. I mean, the invasion was a chess game. Satan was playing chess with the invasion, which leads to the attempt to expel all of the invaders, which leads to the things that are going on that are laying the groundwork for rounding up conservatives and Christians and putting them into internment camps. And Trump and JD will lay the groundwork to make it that a president who has been elected twice can run as vice president and overcome the 22nd Amendment. And then President Trump is predicted to die in 2028, 7 days before the plane crash. And then Michelle Obama and Barack Obama will do the same thing that J.D. Vance and Trump were trying to do. And they will be elected. Well, supposedly. Well, I don't know if it'll be legitimate or not. We know how that has gone in the past. Well, what's amazing too is that this 660 weeks and 6 days, which since it's 666, is also 12 years and 8 months exactly. Because remember I said it was an exact month connection? In my opinion, this 660 weeks and 6 days connection wouldn't even be valid unless the exact month connection would be valid, because you can't have the coincidence of this exact month connection and not be relevant. This is primary, in other words. Both of them are equally valid in terms of prophetic significance. So why 12 years and 8 months? Well, it's very simple. God is using this number 128 to point to the 128th word in the Greek concordance, Strong's concordance, G128, which is the word for the Egyptian, which God is using and playing on to point to Barack Obama and identify him. Oh, no, I'm sorry. It's the Ethiopian. This is a typo. It's the Ethiopian. But the Ethiopian in the New Testament was on his way to Egypt. That's why I got confused. He is a servant, the Ethiopian in the Bible, and that's what he's called, the Ethiopian, was on his way back from Jerusalem to Cairo, to Egypt, and because he is a servant in the queen's royal circle. He was a high up servant, I forget. A very important, the treasurer, I think. Yes, he was the treasurer of the queen. Very important figure in the hierarchy in Egypt. But queen is king symbolism, which ties back to the king of Rock and Little Egypt, right here. So this Ethiopian ties to Little Egypt. That's also a confirmation of the relevance here. Because this is how God's true big picture of signs, patterns, and connections, which is only being explained on this channel, works. It works on the principle of second and third and multiple witnesses confirming a matter, as the Bible says is required. And so the Ethiopian ties to the Little Egypt and Graceland here. The king of Rock and the palace, king of Egypt. Symbolism. Okay, and well, the thing is, this ties to Mrs. Robinson because Barack Obama was born exactly 128 weeks before the birth of Michelle Robinson. This is astounding. This connection here is huge. It's so amazing, this connection here. Because this number 128 connects in both ways. Because Mrs. Michelle Robinson, or Miss Michelle Robinson, was born exactly 128 weeks after Barack Obama, which, by the way, is a massive proof in itself that God is using the number 128 to point to the birth of Barack Obama, because he was born in East Africa, near Ethiopia. That's why. Barack Obama was born in East Africa. That's a fact. If you've been brainwashed to think otherwise, now you know it was brainwashing. This prediction proves everything that I am saying, and that's the point of the prediction. Let's stop here for a second. I know far better than you and anyone the reason and purpose for this prediction is from God. And make no mistake, it is for the purpose of proving the controversial things that I am saying. It is not for the purpose of for you to go, oh, cool, neat. You were able to know ahead of time that Paul Simon was going to die on a date. No, that is not the purpose of this prediction. That's silly. God would not do something silly like that. There is a purpose to this prediction. And the purpose is to give me a voice to prove to you the things that I am saying in this video that are proven to be true through God's true big picture of signs, patterns, and connections, which will be proven to be true when the prediction comes to pass. The prediction, when it comes to pass, will prove that this is God's true big picture of signs, patterns, and connections, and the things that God's big picture of signs, patterns, and connections proves, these controversial things, will be proven to be true when the prediction comes to pass. And Barack Obama was born in Kenya, in West Kenya, near Ethiopia, and that's proven with this connection to the Ethiopian. And there's actually much more to this, to this usage of the Ethiopian to prove that God, or to prove that Barack Obama was born in Kenya. But the fact that he was makes him the unconstitutional president, which incidentally, and not coincidentally, is the thing that enabled the rise of Trump. The thing that he became famous for in the beginning and his rise in politics was for calling out Barack Obama for not having produced his birth certificate because he wasn't born in America. All right? Now, it's actually true. If you have watched the documentary Dreams from My Real Father, which is highly recommended. Dreams from My Real Father, a play on Barack Obama's autobiography that was written by Bill Ayers, Dreams from My Father. And Bill Ayers has even said publicly on video, it's not a conspiracy. He didn't write the book. They both conspired together. Why? Because they're communists. And anyway, Barack Obama's biological father was not Barack Obama Sr. He got pulled into this by Barack Obama's grandfather, who was undercover in the FBI, which is why he was constantly moving around the country as a supposed furniture salesman. No furniture salesmen move around the country like that. And he got assigned to Hawaii because Barack Obama's biological father, who was from Chicago, the leader of the communist movement in Hawaii, was assigned there to lead the communist movement in Hawaii. And Barack Obama's grandfather was assigned to monitor the communist movement in Hawaii. And that's how the biological father's path and 18-year-old Barack Obama's mother paths crossed each other. And the communist seduced, his name is Frank Marshall Davis, seduced Barack Obama's mother and got her pregnant, and abortion was illegal at the time. And had abortion been legal, ironically, the Antichrist president would never have been born. And not coincidentally, Hawaii was the first place to legalize abortions because it's a prophetic sign pointing to and confirming all that I'm saying. It's not a coincidence that the Antichrist was supposedly born in Hawaii, but never would have been born had abortions been legal, and then Hawaii becoming the first state to legalize abortions. Anyway, Barack Obama's grandfather feared for his job, and so he brought in Barack Obama Sr. to play the role of the dad. And Barack Obama Sr. was in America at the time as part of a CIA program to bring in people, young youth from Kenya, to counter the communist movement in Kenya and give them an American experience. Barack Obama Sr. agreed to the farce in exchange for being allowed to stay to finish his doctorate. And that's, by the way, the real true reason why the mother and father were never together. Except they did do one thing, which was genius. In order to make their marriage seem real, they went to Kenya together and had the baby in Kenya. And they did that to fool immigration. So, yes, Frank Marshall Davis is, and that's, by the way, why Barack Obama went to Chicago, because he ended up in his teenage years having a relationship with his biological father and learning communism from him. And that's why he went to Chicago after pursuing communist politics in university. He went to become a street activist in Chicago, and then the rest is history. So anyway, he went to follow in his father's footsteps in Chicago. Okay, so I went really off track there, as I often do when I'm touching upon that subject, because no one really knows the true story about all of that, so I have to, unless you've watched that documentary. But even the documentary doesn't know the whole truth, because the documentary doesn't talk about the facts and the evidence that Barack Obama was in fact born in Kenya. And that's because I know, it dawned on me because God designed my life for all of this. I lived as a Canadian in Hawaii for a long time under the radar. And at one point tried to pursue something like Barack Obama's mother and Barack Obama Sr. did. So that's why it dawned on me that that's what actually happened. Because you've got that both are proven to be true. And it makes total sense that that's actually what happened. And I'm, I guess, the only one that knows that both are true. The evidence for Barack Obama having been born in Kenya is overwhelmingly true. And also the evidence for Frank Marshall Davis being his biological father is overwhelmingly true. Because Barack Obama Sr. and the mother went to Kenya to fool immigration. Anyway, we have this, as I said, the connections require second witnesses. We have this 660 weeks and 6 days connection followed by the 66th prime number of months, which is 317 months exactly, to this date here, September 25th, 2025, which was the day that People.com published an article interview of Priscilla Presley. And the article was about Graceland and how she was gutted, quote unquote, when she learned that Lisa Marie Presley had sold the majority of her stake in the estate because she was broke. And so it's all about Graceland. So we have Graceland connecting to Graceland. By the way, Elvis Presley died in Graceland 6 years, 6 months, and 6 days exactly to February 22nd, 1984, the day that the Lisa Marie plane was brought back to the Graceland estate from Florida. in a huge homecoming ceremony and fanfare and celebration with the mayor of Memphis and everyone on the streets as the plane rolled through the streets to Graceland Estate. It was a homecoming. It symbolized a number of Paul Simon songs. Okay. Anyway, that's another example of Elvis Presley, the King of Rock, symbolizing the King Antichrist, and which is symbolized by Egypt, etc., like I just explained. So 6 years, 6 months, and 6 days from his death to the day that the Lisa Marie plane got brought back. Now, the thing is, this September 25th, 2025 People.com article was exactly 4 + 4 + 4 months after September 25th, 2024, and coincidentally, another People.com article, which was another interview of the granddaughter of Elvis Presley, Keo, or however you pronounce her first name, Presley, who starred in horror movies in which the theme is a haunted mansion, and that's why it connects to the Graceland Mansion. But the interview was about how she finished Lisa Marie's memoir about Graceland and then published it. And the Lisa Marie Presley interview here is about her having just published 2 days before her book, which talks about how she was gutted by Lisa Marie selling her stake in Graceland. So both interviews, exactly 1 year apart, were about books published about Graceland. Okay? And it's exactly 4 + 4 + 4 months because the 44th president is the Antichrist. Now, it is 36 days from this September 25th date. Okay. Oh, and by the way, on that September 25th, 2024 date, we didn't only have the Graceland Mansion sign, but we had these other haunted mansion signs. For example, Prince Harry, as in king symbolism, and Jim Fallon, as in fallen angels, were in the haunted mansion of Jimmy Fallon's in New York City. And Paul Simon's from New York City. And on that day, we also had the indictment of Eric Adams, as in Adams Family Mansion, and the raid of the Gracie Mansion, which is where the mayors of New York City stay, which hinted at the Graceland Mansion. And so we had this Halloween theme going on that day. And anyway, there's more Halloween connections to Paul Simon, and that's why Paul Simon will fall on Halloween, October 31st. Anyway, it's 36 days here, and 36 is a number that God uses in his signs to symbolize 666, which confirms this. It's a third witness to all of this. We have this trail of signs involving these 666 numbers. And that's because 36 is 6 times 6, but it is also 2 times 18, which is 6 + 6 + 6. And the 36th triangular number, which in a triangle of numbers, the last number in the 36th row is 666. And 1 + 2 + 3 + 4 all the way up to 36 equals 666. Now the thing is, Joe DiMaggio collided and hit his head and suffered a concussion when he collided with another New York Yankee in the outfield, which is where Paul Simon sang Mrs. Robinson and about Joe DiMaggio. In that same outfield in Yankee Stadium, Joe DiMaggio collided with another New York Yankee, Merle Hogue, and it was the first of 2 times that they did so. And they suffered a concussion, both of them. And Merle Hogue, in fact, went into surgery, emergency surgery 2 days later. He thought he was all right, but then he had to go into surgery, brain surgery, for a clot in his brain after this collision. Okay? Now, the ball was hit because the 2 outfielders were chasing down the ball that was pop fly, high in the air, in other words. And the ball that was popped up by a player named Goose Goslin. This was in New York City. Goose Goslin hints at a bird strike. Again, Mrs. Robinson will become the president after a bird strike. After Kamala Harris and Gavin Newsom fall. Okay? And Goose Goslin played for St. Louis. The plane crash of Gavin Newsom's is predicted to be in St. Louis. So Goose, as in bird, Goslin. A famous player too, by the way, not just some obscure player. So it makes it more prophetic, because there's other connections to Goose Goslin, because that's how God's signs works. It's an infinite web, and when you try to explain part of God's big picture of signs, you end up pulling the entire web. I mean, really, I should go off onto a tangent and start explaining all of the secondary proof that proves that Goose Goslin is prophetic. But that would just go on and on into infinity. That's just why it's extremely difficult to explain God's true big picture of signs, patterns, and connections. So we're just going to cut it off here. And furthermore, I can't remember what they are, and I don't have time to go in and research it again, because I've already done it. And so anyway, this date of the collision was July 28th, 1936. Exactly 89 years before this Paul Simon prophetic sign date. This collision and head injuries were in New York City, and so was this sign on July 28th, 2025. The Midtown Manhattan shooting, in which the shooter was complaining, had written a manifesto letter before he died in the shooting, speaking about his grievance regarding head injuries from football, which is why he went into the tower in Manhattan, where the headquarters are for the NFL, because the NFL is known for its head injuries. Okay, this is Paul Simon. Paul Simon, furthermore, is from New York City. The head injuries shooting is a thing that points to Paul Simon. Paul Simon also, in the Graceland song, it begins with, the first lyric of the song is, the Mississippi Delta was shining like a national guitar. This is because the mark of the Antichrist, which is the SHOT, which is what mass shootings symbolize, the things that come out of guns and go into people symbolize the things that come out of people and go into people. The SHOT mark of the Antichrist, CVD disease thing, SHOT, is symbolized by shootings. And that's what the shooting at the headquarters of the NFL due to grievance over head injuries is symbolic of. It's symbolic of how the mark of the Antichrist will induce delta brain waves through 5G frequencies that will trigger demonic possession of the individual through their brain. That's why Paul Simon's first lyric of the song Graceland is the Mississippi Delta, as in delta brainwaves, was shining like a national guitar, which hints at the movie The Shining, which is about demonic possession and involves a very large hotel, which is mansion symbolism. It has many rooms, just like the White House mansion does, and has 44 plus 44 plus 44 rooms, because the 44th president Antichrist will reside in that mansion, which is what the Graceland mansion hints at, because it is also symbolic of a palace in Egypt, and the king of Egypt in this palace is symbolic of the Antichrist. Now, the movie The Shining is about demonic possession, but the star of the movie Shelley Duvall was or dated Paul Simon. And they infamously or famously broke up at the airport, as in portal to the realm of demonic demons that will emerge and demonically possess people. At the airport, Paul Simon broke up with Shelley Duvall as she was about to get on a plane to the UK to film the movie The Shining. And they met in the filming of the movie Annie Hall, if I recall. And Annie Hall is also symbolism of a mansion. Okay, the name Annie Hall. Okay, so that's why The Shining. That's why Paul Simon sings the Mississippi Delta was shining like a national guitar in the first lyric of the famous Graceland song, which is extremely prophetic. Okay, and that's why the connection is with the 666, because the 666 number appears in the Bible prophecy in context of the mark of the Antichrist, which is the SHOT. Which is why the injury to Joe DiMaggio's head, who wore jersey number 5, as in 5G frequencies that will trigger the things inside people's brains that were put into them through the SHOT, that will trigger demonic possession as described in the 5th trumpet judgment in the Bible prophecy. Okay, that's why from the player number 5's hit of the head, we have this connection to the Midtown Manhattan shooting, which is symbolic of the SHOTs, marks of the Antichrist. Now the killer, the story, if you recall, is how the shooter accidentally went up the wrong elevator bank and ended up on the 33rd floor instead of the floor where the NFL headquarters is, and then killed himself on the 33rd floor. That's a big part of the story, the 33rd floor. That's why it is 3 months and 3 days to the date it is predicted that Paul Simon will fall and injure his head and possibly die or die later. Okay, well, what's with the 89 months? Well, this is relevant because 89, the inverse of it, is like 1 divided by 89 is 0.01123, which is the number God uses frequently because 1,123 is the 188th prime number, and God uses this number frequently to point to H188 in Strong's Hebrew Concordance, which is the word that means woe, exclamation mark, which is used in the Bible in the context of extreme judgment from God, including in context of the 5th trumpet judgment regarding demonic possession of those who have taken the mark of the Antichrist, who, by the way, will be tortured for 5 months, as Bible prophecy says. Another reason for player number 5. This is also 1,068 months, and 1,068 is the 888th composite number. The name Jesus in Greek is equal to 888 in Greek gematria. Also, the sum of the divisors of 1,068 is 2,520. This number that's repeated in Bible prophecy that symbolizes the period of the Antichrist and the end times. So this is like the number, if you will, that symbolizes the end times, and that's why this is relevant also. All right, now, speaking of Joe DiMaggio and hitting his head, the other time he injured his head, when he also collided with Gordon and this guy, another player named Gordon, and again Hogue, it was a 3-way collision, also in New York City. Joe DiMaggio was let out of the hospital on this day with, as the New York Times article says, a head wound. And it was just a couple days after he went into the hospital, after the collision. But from what I gather, it wasn't clear the condition of Joe DiMaggio. So the reason why God chose the day he was released from the hospital, at least from what I understand, there could be more, including the game on that day, but it's because the news was reporting that Joe DiMaggio's head injury he was dismissed from the hospital with his head injury. All right, well anyway, it's 1,260 days, which is this number that's repeated frequently 7 times in Bible prophecy that symbolizes the period of the Antichrist and the end times and the mark of the Antichrist. And so we get this number of days exactly to the day that Paul Simon was born. And again, Paul Simon sings about Joe DiMaggio in Yankee Stadium, no less. And it's about Mrs. Robinson, which is prophetically pointing to how Mrs. Robinson will become the president, leading to the Antichrist becoming the president again after she steps down. But she will facilitate this after the bird strike, which is why we have this over here. We have the prophetic Blue Jays-Yankees baseball game, which is described in the other video, 22 days before this date, which is 2 days before it's predicted that Paul Simon will fall and hit his head. Well, it's also predicted that either the Blue Jays will win the World Series on this day in Game 5, or there will be a collision between one or two Blue Jays. Either they collide with each other or one guy collides with the outfield wall or something, but there will be a head injury. Okay, so either or maybe both. But this date will be exactly, although I forgot to write it in here, 144 weeks before Kamala Harris's and Gavin Newsom's plane is predicted to crash due to a bird strike into a baseball stadium, into the outfield of the St. Louis Cardinals baseball team, which is why Goose Goslin played for St. Louis, and on and on. And Paul Simon sang in the outfield, Mrs. Robinson. That's why this plane will crash into the outfield of the baseball stadium. 144 weeks because 144 is a very prophetic number in the book of Revelation about the end times. And the location of the crash, St. Louis, will be where the Great American Eclipse peaked in 2017 and then passed over Little Egypt as it was peaking. The eclipse in 2024 crossed the path of the 2017 eclipse exactly where it peaked over Cairo, Illinois, in Little Egypt. It engendered an X over America, and the mark of the Antichrist is symbolized by an X. An X is symbolic of the mark of the Antichrist, and an X is two straight lines that cross each other in their middles. The middle date, the exact middle date between the two eclipses that engendered an X over America that symbolizes the mark of the Antichrist, was the day that the first American took the mark of the Antichrist. December 14th, 2020. The very first day it was taken outside of a trial. Incidentally, as I said that, the clock here of the recording ticked 14:12, and the date again was 12/14 outside the US. 14:12. So, this diagram is now finished. Believe me, I know far better than you how the prediction made in this video was derived. And more importantly, I know far better than you why the righteous Christian God of the Bible has given me a voice through this prediction. If you are a quote-unquote Christian or Muslim, this prediction was not learned through a demon. Be warned that blaspheming the Holy Spirit is the unforgivable sin. If you are a New Ager or New Spirituality person, this prediction was not learned through somehow tapping into the supposed universal collective consciousness. If you are a conspiracy theorist, this prediction was not learned through figuring out a supposed code that the Illuminati and Satanists are using. This prediction was learned through the Bible and through watching carefully the Lord's prophetic signs, which Jesus commanded all Christians to do. Besides proving that Jesus Christ is the Lord, the reason why God has given me a voice through this prediction is to prove that the controversial things that I am saying in the videos on this channel are the truth. Therefore, a wise person will want to watch all of the videos on this channel. What I will also do is create a video or two that summarizes some of the controversial things that the Lord will prove to be true when the prediction being made in this video comes to pass. I will leave links to these must-watch videos in the description box below this video. Again, the purpose of this prediction, that is from God, is to prove these things that I will talk about. And therefore, it would be foolish to not watch the videos that I will leave links for in the description box below this video. Aliens and UFOs are demons masquerading as aliens and UFOs. Most people's spiritual experiences are demonic deception, especially if they are not a true follower of Christ. In the last days, many people who claim to be a follower of Christ will have spiritual experiences that are in reality demonic. God became a man and died a horrible death at the hand of the ruler of this world, Satan, and then defeated death for you, so that you too can overcome death, which is the price that must be paid for sin. It is time to repent, which means to change one's ways and turn to God and become a disciple of Jesus. Do not listen to or follow the example of most quote-unquote Christians. Instead, follow the teachings of Jesus, which most quote-unquote Christians ignore. Like Jesus, you must surrender your life. Put nothing ahead of Jesus, your Lord. Like Jesus, you must lay down your life so that you may live. As Jesus said, one must die first, like a kernel of wheat going into the ground, in order to then grow and produce fruit. And like Jesus said, one must produce fruit, or else like a branch or a tree not producing fruit, they will be thrown into the fire. Jesus was speaking to quote-unquote Christians when he said this. One must die the self in order to be born again. And like Jesus said, one must be born again to enter the kingdom. Like Jesus, you must sacrifice your life for the sake of the coming kingdom. It means to do work that involves some form of sacrifice and risk. To have faith does not mean to intellectually agree. You need to demonstrate your faith through taking action. To have faith means to trust in God's promises. Taking action demonstrates trust and fear of the Lord. The primary reason that the wrath of God is coming upon America is quote-unquote Christians that do not get what I have just explained. The only reason a Christian is alive is in order to help other people become Christians and make it to the kingdom. Do not be deceived by those on the political left claiming to be quote-unquote Christians. There is no such thing as a Christian on today's political progressive left. Jesus said, "Do not think I have come to abolish or change any bit of the law or the prophets of the Old Testament Bible." In other words, the God of the Old Testament Bible is the exact same God of the New Testament Bible. It is essential that you learn about the God of the Bible and his ways. The God of the Old Testament Bible is looking to see who will fear him, and to fear God is not the same thing as quote-unquote revering or honoring God. Through Christ's ransom payment, a Christian is someone who has been redeemed and freed from slavery to sin and Satan. In response, a true Christian recognizes that their life in this world does not belong to them, and they become a willing slave to Jesus for the sake of the kingdom. Please leave a like and upvote the video, and once this prediction has come to pass, share this video with everyone you know, and more, don't stop sharing it everywhere in social media. And don't only put the link to this video or another video on this channel in comments sections of places you typically visit, but importantly, put the link to the video in places you never visit, where people who don't think like you visit. If you are a quote-unquote Christian, nothing in terms of an evangelism tool compares to this video with its prediction. It is a massive bag of gold. Beware of Jesus' warning through the quote-unquote Christian that did nothing with his bag of gold and was banished to hell. Also, read Ezekiel chapter 3 and 33 for this same warning. If you think you might be spending too much time watching videos instead of working and sacrificing for the kingdom through handing out flyers and potentially helping hundreds of people in the same length of time as a video, My flyer is filled with amazing information that people need to know right now, and it points people to the video channel. Now is not the time to be handing out typical evangelical tracts that are largely based in error anyway, such as, quote, Jesus loves you, unquote, for example. You can hand out the flyer on busy street corners, put them on car windshields in busy parking lots, and put them in mailboxes. Just send the file to your local print shop. You can download the file from the website. Please leave a like and upvote the video, and once this prediction has come to pass, share this video with everyone you know, and more, don't stop sharing it everywhere in social media. It is essential that everyone immediately read the homepage of my website, asteroidprediction.com. If you are watching this on the YouTube platform, please note that not all of the videos are on YouTube. You need to switch to the Odyssey.com or Rumble.com channel, and do it now in case you aren't able to later.